For more on the cross-strait ties in this critical juncture, we are joined in our Beijing studio Zhong Houtao, who's a researcher in Taiwan studies at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
In Taipei, we have Cheng You-ping, professor from the Department of Public Administration and Policy at Taipei University. Welcome, professor. And join us via Skype. In Sichuan province, here on the mainland, we have Joanna Lei, a former legislator in Taiwan. She's also former advisor to the new party of Taiwan, the party that we are talking about today. Let me go to you, Ms. Lei. First of all, your response to the latest, shall we say, prosecution of these 4 young officials from the new party.
Well, certainly it has sent jitters to a lot of people in Taiwan. Of all the recent moves by DPP, we have seen the place turning from a democratic and progressive regime into a regime which can be very heavy-handed in dealing with dissident and opposition views. These 4 students have their constitutional rights violated, due process abridged, and also even their personal safety not guaranteed. So in Taiwan, this has sent through a lot of jitters, and people are asking, what is Democratic Progressive Party really trying to bring Taiwan into?
What do you think, Professor Cheng, about that question, since you are now based in Taipei?
Well, I think it's very obvious. The DPP and the Tsai Ing-wen authority is trying to send a political message or a signal to the general public that anyone who dares to stand in the camp of pro-unification or those who are in favor of improving cross-strait relations toward a peaceful development path, they're not going to tolerate that. And they're putting a very heavy hand on the new party young members. These young members, they age around 30 or so. Some of them are even not yet 30 years old. So we have to say that after this political show that they deliberately put on the media, it is sending a chilling effect throughout the island. It is telling people that if you dare to oppose DPP's independence, separatist line and try to speak up in favor of pro-unification line, we're going to let you have a hard time. So today's message is very clear, but then it also backfired. It's obvious that the society at large pretty much criticized DPP's wrongdoing, and by doing so, this whole operation has become a joke. It is a terrible political show, and we have to say that it is going to invite more criticisms and dissenting opinions throughout the island.
Whether this is a joke, or actually this is a very politically motivated beginning of something else, we don't know at this point. Mr. Zhong, your analysis from the mainland's perspective, what actually do you think is happening right now on the Taiwan island?
I think just as Professor Zhong and Joanna said, the DPP is trying to prosecute, to threaten, or to kill the new party. The reason is that the new party upholds one China principle. So the DPP tries
and they were not shying from expressing it.
Yes. So the DPP is trying to eliminate the enemy, especially those from the blue camp, including both KMT and the new party.
So now, what is going to be this whole picture? Ms. Lei, we noticed several things recently. Alone, the national security strategy of the United States mentioned Taiwan in somewhat a different wording compared to previously. Some say there's not much nature change. Others say maybe behind it there's something going on. And the other thing is, Taiwan and Japan recently signed a referendum at a local level about so-called the security of the sea. That has really attracted a lot of attention as to what exactly the two sides are trying to achieve at this point. Bringing this together with the DPP's motive behind this arrest of the 4 young officials from the new party, how should we understand this bigger picture, Ms. Lei?
Well, I think this is an extremely insightful question. If you look at the doctrine of DPP, because it is insisting on Taiwan independence and separatist movement, it does have to have international allies. And from Chen Shui-bian's regime to Tsai Ing-wen's regime, they all believe that the United States and Japan will be their allies should there be any political or even military confrontations across the Taiwan Straits. So you could see Tsai Ing-wen in her first term leaning very close to the United States to the extent of asking United States to even consider further military cooperation on the Taiwan island. And to Japan, it's the same gesture. They would agree to give Japan sovereignty claims in exchange of fishing rights, and that we all know is an equal exchange. Sovereignty, including the islands and the sea, are governed by U.S. Convention of the Law of Sea, and Taiwan should have its right to claim a very extensive exclusive economic zone. And the Tsai Ing-wen government is trying to secure only partial rights in the exclusive economic zone in exchange of not claiming sovereignty, giving Japan sovereignty of a huge territory and huge potential claim against China. So overall, Taiwan seems to be putting itself in the hands of United States and Japan as a lever against China, which to me is the worst possible position for Taiwan.
Professor Cheng, do you agree with that, that actually Taiwan authorities right now is giving up the legitimate right of China as a whole in exchange for political favor coming from the United States and Japan for their governance in Taiwan? How dangerous, really, would that be for the future and prosperity of Taiwan, in a way? Professor Cheng.
Well, in the first few weeks of Tsai Ing-wen's administration, people actually had doubts that she might not be as ideological, as radical as Chen Shui-bian was. It is a possibility that because of her training in England, she might lean toward a little bit more pragmatism approach. However, during the last year or so, we've been able to see it is more and more evident that Tsai Ing-wen is actually a very much hardliner when it comes to separatist movement, Taiwan independence approach. Now, Tsai Ing-wen obviously is betting on joining the Indo-Pacific strategy as envisioned probably by Abe, Shinzo, and also Donald Trump. And it is clear that Tsai Ing-wen and DPP is trying to join U.S.-Japan alliance as a chip in their hands. And she's willing to bet Taiwan's future on this Japan-United States alliance. However, we have to say that in light of the Chinese Army, Navy, and Air Force military growth and development, United States can no longer hold on to the first island chain as a possible, a feasible line of containment against China. So it is very clear that United States actually is in retreat. And when that happens, in the future, Taiwan is going to be in a very difficult situation vis-a-vis mainland China. Inside Taiwan, there are a lot of criticisms. A lot of scholars and politicians in the opposition parties, they are asking Tsai Ing-wen to reconsider her position because by doing so, what she's taking now, it would only impose more and more risk on Taiwan, and Taiwanese people would suffer as a result of that.
Mr. Zhong, you know, when we talk about the Taiwan issue, there's always in the shadow another player, that is the United States. But China has made it very clear this is one country's internal affairs, and the United States or others should not interfere into it. And the United States, until this administration as well, has been committed to the one China principle or one China policy. Having said that, though, Mr. Zhong, there are two things going on. One, national security strategy in the United States, how irresponsible, we wouldn't come into details, but it did mention China as a competitive rival. even though it could be an empty phrase, some people of interest would like to cash in about that phrase. Secondly, the so-called Indo-Pacific policy and the strategy of the so-called Trump administration right now. Even though many say in the United States, this is an empty phrase, they don't have any specific, they don't even know what they're talking about, but still, some people of interest want to cash in about that as well. So, Mr. Zhong, we're talking about quite a complicated situation at this point. Mr. Zhong.
I think the Donald Trump is playing a balanced approach on Taiwan issue. On the one hand, the Donald Trump is trying to honor one China policy, and actually she had already done that. She publicly said, "I honor one China policy," and for this reason, he just want to make a good relationship with China and want to sign a more economic agreement. For example, in his last visit to China. And actually, the two countries has created lots of great results. And on the other hand, Donald Trump also want to take Taiwan as a bargaining chip for China, and he just want to take Taiwan as leverage against China to make China make more compromise. So I think Donald Trump is making a balanced approach, make a two-hands approach. And I think in future, especially just as you said in the newest national security strategy report, the United States said it will invite Taiwan to participate in the Indo-Asia strategy, and I think that sent a very strong political signal. So the Chinese mainland will become much more alert on Taiwan issue in the Sino and U.S. relationship.
Okay, it is not only that, but also the $1.4 billion arms sales to Taiwan that this administration has agreed on. Of course, you could say things like that happened before, but every time it creates quite some ripple effect of the relations across the Taiwan Strait. So, Ms. Lei, at this critical juncture, what do you think people, particularly like you and Professor Cheng, many of you have been very much holding close to the idea of reunification and also to the idea of good relations across the Taiwan Strait for the eternal good of people in Taiwan. But what can you do when you have also the Taiwan authorities led by Tsai Ing-wen there who have very different view? What can be done, Ms. Lei?
Well, I probably have to add a very grave picture to you, because Tsai Ing-wen is very familiar with how to use rule by law. She has asked the Legislative Yuan to pass a series of laws, including the Transitional Act and laws that expand the current definition of treason, current definition of how national security-related acts can be applied. So all in all, you will have a more totalitarian, higher pressure regime under Tsai Ing-wen's first term. And all the oppositions will be in an extremely difficult situation, and probably some of them will meet personal peril or harm. So the most recent picture will be really bleak. However, the world will be looking at a U.S. and Japan. However, the world will see a new China rising in all different areas.
I see. Professor Cheng, what about your view about this? We got to talk about the arms sales. We talk about the so-called strategy from the United States. We talk about the name that is being given to China. And there's also something like the National Defense Authority Authorization Act for the 2018 fiscal year, which talk about the feasibility of visits between Taiwan and the United States, so-called. So how, when all of these putting together, people like you in Taiwan could react and should react?
Well, a lot of us in Taiwan are very, very much concerned with what's going on in the United States, especially with Donald Trump's very vague, very erratic foreign policy approach. Now, Donald Trump may have come up with this national strategy paper. However, if you read through that 68 pages, you will clearly notice that it's highly ambiguous. Donald Trump is ambivalent about what to do with mainland China. On the one hand, he's accusing China and Russia as revisionist powers. And they're trying to erode United States security and prosperity, and they would like to face up to this. However, while he's emphasizing a hardliners approach, on the other hand, he kept emphasizing in that paper that United States should work with China on an equal footing, on a reciprocal basis. Now, that's very interesting. It goes to show us that Donald Trump or the United States administration at this moment is taking Taiwan as a bargaining chip.
Right.
Taiwan is nothing but a pawn in the game, and they are using Taiwan to bargain with China. And when that happens, it is very, very pitiful for Taiwanese people.
I see.
People here in Taiwan can see that. People fear being a pawn in the game, that eventually we may be sacrificed. So it is a sad moment to see that Tsai Ing-wen not only disregard these advices, but also she's putting on a heavy hand on anyone who disagrees with her.
I see.
And it is sad, but we have to say we will have to wait until the next general election.
I see. Mr. Zhong, the mainland, very firm about this. The central government of China, very firm about the eventual future between Taiwan and the mainland. So with that in mind, what would these ripples at this point mean in the short term and particularly in the longer term, Mr. Zhong?
I think in the short term, United States is irritating China, especially it is challenging China's sovereignty and territorial integrity. So I think the Chinese mainland has already lodged its solemn protest against United States. And in future, I think the Taiwan issue is China's internal issue, and the two sides will finally be reunified. No matter what kind of role the United States will play, the two sides, the final reunification will be realized.
I see. Zhong Houtao, Cheng You-ping, and Joanna Lei, thank you so much, the three of you, for your insights and also your analysis. Really appreciate it.